Good morning. Welcome to Beacon Church. I'm Robert Kelly. I'm one of the pastors here at the church. For those haven't yet had a chance to meet, we are really glad that you have decided to come out and be a part of our P90S series. P90S, of course, which we ripped off from P90X. Many of you are familiar with P90X. Some of you might even have watched a couple of the videos, like me. I'm not saying I'm doing it. I'm saying I've watched a couple of the videos, and they are exhausting and to watch them. And one of the cool things about this is when you turn it on, you'll always, and you know what this is like, back from I think the 80s aerobics videos when, we used to see those things in our lives. You know how they have a whole group of people. It isn't usually a single person doing these things. It's usually a group of people. And I like that. In P90X, you turn it on and all of a sudden there's like four or five fantastic looking people. They're just fit and ripped and they're looking all good and they're out there doing their exercises and showing you different things, and there's a coach there encouraging them on, and there's some banter going on between them, and they're encouraging and challenging each other. A couple of times one of them will say, how many are you going to do? And one will, he'll say 13, and the next one will say, how many are you going to do? I'll do 14. And then, the lady at the end, she'll say, I'll do 16, because she's going to, do a little bit better than all the guys ahead of her. And, there's all of this sort of competition, but a healthy kind of a competition. There's an encouragement toward really making this thing matter. And in a way, because you've kind of welcomed them into your living room, you're sort of joining with them as well, and not doing as well, but you're joining with them as well. And you're sort of a new little community of fitness that is being formed right there in your living room. One of the most successful times for me that I'd ever had in being a regular gym rat it was quite a few years ago now. I guess it was about 10 years ago. Chris and I decided we were sort of in the same trajectory. This is around the time that the doctor had told me that I needed to lose some weight and I needed to get healthy. And Chris and I were sort of both committed to this. We were going to work out. We were going to the gym 3, 4, 5 times a week together. This is also the time that Cheryl was really helping me out with her. We were doing the whole South Beach thing, and so we were really committed to this whole new lifestyle, and we were doing great. And there was such an encouragement of working together, being a part of it. I don't know how successful it's all been. I know I still have to move some mass around, because the other night I was listening to Cheryl talk to one of the boys she was trying to cut toenails. And that it's kind of it's tickles, and so you don't want people to touch your toes. So she's trying to cut the toenails of one of the kids, and so she says, you better sit still, or I'm going to call your dad in here to sit on you. And I thought, why can't you call me in there to hold him down? Like, why is it this? I have to move some mass from here to here, apparently, because I can't hold him down. I can only sit on him right now. And so I was like, really? All right. So I still got a lot of work to do. But what we're doing, of course, is that was a really good stretch for me, because I had a partner. We had some like-mindedness in our efforts, a workout buddy. They say that runners, we got a lot of runners now in our congregation. They love to run with people who are just a little bit better than them. Because running with someone who's just a little bit better, they can often pull you along. They could challenge you and encourage you in a way. And when you are able and interested in running with people who aren't quite as fast, you know what you're doing? You're helping them out. There's a sort of selflessness about this. In fact, you probably would want to do both. You'd probably want to find some runs with people who are better and some runs with people that you can actually be a part of drawing them along and pulling them along. Because this is what a workout buddy would do. When you look at your spiritual development in this whole P90S series, you've got this spiritual core that we're talking about. And that spiritual core, when you're strengthening it, you might already say, you know what, I'm committed, I'm in. I want to strengthen my spiritual core. I'm going to kick it up a notch or two. I'm going to make sure that I'm starting to read the scriptures. I'm going to work on these memory verses. I'm going to try to commit some more time to prayer. I'm going to strengthen that core. But you might still buy into all of those things and think, something still feels like it's lacking. I'm missing something. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm still missing something in this pursuit that I'm committed to this year. What if it's this workout buddy piece? What if it's the fellowship piece that's missing? Is it possible that one of the things that would help make your exercise plans complete would be finding some workout buddies, some spiritual partners who will be with you in this journey. It might just be the case for you. If it is, as we're going to be looking at this morning, you're going to discover throughout the scriptures that it is key. If you're interested in building your spiritual core, it will be key for you to get involved and invest in some humble, Christ-centered relationships. It will be key. It'll be an important and a strategic part of your own growth. In it, you'll find a little bit of accountability. You'll find just the healthy amount of competition even. You'll also find just a little bit of challenge and encouragement that maybe you'll need to help get you over some of those hurdles that you face. You might also find that the very act of encouraging others fortifies and strengthens your soul. See, being a part of their journey might be something that you are desperately lacking. So that's what we're going to be pulling apart a little bit here today. So open up, if you would, to Philippians chapter 2. Last week, Trevor did a spectacular job unpacking verse 1 of chapter 2, helping us see this pre-workout checklist, the importance of understanding who we are in Christ and understanding how that impacts what it is that he's trying to do in our lives. But you also notice we had a break. We stopped in nearly a mid-sentence, and that's where we're picking up this morning in chapter 2, verse 2, where Paul says to us, "Then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit, and of one mind." He talks about this idea of being like-minded, be like-minded. For Paul's joy to be complete, we needed to be like-minded. You know, to look out for each other is such a key part of like-mindedness. To be in this thing together is so important. This is what happened with the children of Israel. Whenever the children of Israel were like-minded in where they were going, things seemed to go well for them. When the children of Israel were divided, things didn't go so well for them. They started seeing fractures and fights and problems. You know, it reminds me of a story about a Sunday school class. There was a kid who was listening to the story of the Old Testament, and he said, "All right, so I have a question. So the children of Israel were starving, and they went down to Egypt." Yes, that's right. And then the children of Israel had to face down Pharaoh and cross the Red Sea. Yes, that's right. While they were in slavery. Yes, that's right. And then the children of Israel had to conquer the promised land. Yep, that's right. And then the children of Israel had to fight the Philistines. And then the children of Israel established the monarchy, a kingdom. And then they eventually had to fight the Romans. Wow. The teacher says, "Well, what's the question?" The kid says, "While the children of Israel were doing all of this, where were the parents?" You know, because when the children of Israel worked together, when they were a unit, they were doing some phenomenal and spectacular things. When they were like-minded in their pursuit, their family, we, the children of Abraham, when we're like-minded, God will do amazing and incredible things in our lives and in the lives of the people that are all around us, in our communities. That's what the scriptures tell us. There's a like-mindedness. Now, the like-mindedness isn't about this sort of robotic wooden conformity. Often you'll get into Christian circles and it's all about conforming to the norms. Like-mindedness can be abused in so many ways like this. You've got to do it just our way. You've got to be a cookie-cutter kind of a Christian. Never in the scriptures are you going to find that understanding of what it means to be a Christian. The people who are closest to you will be pursuing their spiritual journeys in ways different from you. They'll be experiencing God's presence in different ways. They'll be doing things that you will not be doing. And you'll be doing things that they won't be doing. And it will be your unique journey, and it has to be your unique journey. This is between you and your God. When we talk about like-mindedness, we don't mean that you've got to do everything according to the way that I would do it. There has to be a level of freedom and a level of each person being accountable to their God that we have got to be careful to protect. So then what does like-mindedness mean? I think Paul hits it for us because the scholars tell us he sort of brackets this idea. He says to us, again, verse 2, he says, "Make my joy complete, having the same love and being one in spirit and of mind." He says, by having a mutual affection for each other and by being soulmates. Not in the soulmates kind of a way that we talk about with couples. You'll find your soulmate. I don't even know if real soulmates exist in that sense. I think you become soulmates. I don't know that you find a soulmate. But in this sense, it's more like the Australian mate. You're soulmates. These are your buds. These are the ones that when you find a person, no matter where they are, from anywhere in the world, and you sit down and you find out that they're believers and followers of Christ, and all of a sudden there is a connection. And if you've ever had that moment, you're like, wow, we're like family. I don't even know you, and we're like family somehow because we're soulmates. We're spiritual brothers and sisters because we're all of the children of Israel. We're the nation that God has called out. There's a mutual affection and a soulmate kind of connection that is the overriding principles of like-mindedness. You guys, some of you might be familiar with Aikido. It's a type of martial arts, and it is unique in that it's very conscientious about your opponent, about how you treat your opponent with respect and with dignity. One of the practitioners is Mitsugi Sayotome, and he says that if you were all alone in the universe with no one to talk to, no one with which to share the beauty of the stars, to laugh with, to touch, what would be your purpose in life? It's the other life. It is love, which gives your life meaning. This is harmony. We must discover the joy of each other, the joy of challenge, the joy of growth. See, it's this other kind of life. It's this life of mutual affection and interconnectedness and that like-mindedness. Now, you see, we've seen in our whole P90S so far that like-mindedness is based on finding a group of folks who are gospel-loving, who are holy, living, pursuing, who are mission-completing kinds of people. That's what we've seen in the last few weeks. And when you find those kinds of folks, and you are like-minded in your mutual affection and your soulmate status, then now you've begun to experience this kind of thing that we call, older word now, but we call fellowship. For many of you, I've already heard the reports. This is one of our best seasons ever of growth groups. And I've heard so many of you talk about how great your growth groups are going. Would you guys give me a nod if you're in a growth group and if you're enjoying it, if it's a good time? What are some of the things happening in your growth? Are you guys loving it? Is it like something that you've found is enhancing your experience? Yeah? Some good stuff, right? I mean, my wife and I are loving our group. We're just absolutely loving it. Each week, these groups meet on a pretty regular basis and usually weekly. And it's a time for looking at the scriptures and praying and studying a little bit and learning and challenging each other, hearing another's perspective. Sometimes we get to grow just by hearing the challenge that comes from another person and what they've gone through and how they've experienced it and how they've handled it. We get to share a lot of the struggles that we have, our areas of weakness. Anybody here, anybody want to tell us a little about, just a second or so about your group? You loving it? Tell us what you love about it. I love my leader. Yeah, but you're sleeping with him. That doesn't exactly apply. So wrong. How could you say stuff like this in church? These filters. Some others. Yes, you love your leader. I'm sorry. All right, go ahead. Some others. What do you love about your group? What's some of the things something that's happened or something you've taken out of it? Go ahead, Dante.
Well, like you were saying about the whole mind and having that sense of family, with Christ, I definitely sense that. We'll have this one day access and this love for Christ and wanting to get to know Him more and closer to Him.
Yeah, there's some sort of just knowing you're in this with other folks. Yeah. Some others, another. Go ahead.
Most people are kind of just getting to know each other and everything, never really met before the group, but you can tell over time, over the past couple of months, that there's a genuine caring concern for each other, for each other's needs, burdens, and just openness and sharing. And it's good to know that you have people that support you
Yeah. That's to see that develop and grow, and to know that people they're even thinking about what they prayed about throughout the week and encouraging you later on and asking you how things are going. It's a huge part. It's an important part, definitely. Anyone else want to tell us something about going on in their group? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just find it's pretty much the only way to get to know people at a deeper level in church.
Yeah.
Sunday morning you just come in and see each other, but you can't get to a level of conversation that you can when you get together on a weekly basis.
Yeah. What both Rich and Ro are saying is it's such a part. I've seen this in our group as well. There's a kind of sharing that goes on, and that type of sharing is the thing that actually you get to know people and their lives, and those shared experiences somehow knit us together in a way that, this is what we see. There is a strengthening of our spiritual core that takes place as we find these kinds of relationships. Now, here's one of the things that Paul tells us, though, about how this fellowship, how this connection is weakened or even destroyed. He tells us because of selfish ambition or vain conceit, you'll see a downturn in this kind of interconnectedness. Look at verse 3. He says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit." Nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. And I think he's warning about this because selfish ambition or vain conceit will hurt your unity. It'll hurt your fellowship. That interconnectedness will suffer in the face of selfish ambition or vain conceit. You can't actually be a decent workout buddy if you're only interested in your own stuff. In the old days, before they had all the machines in the gyms, and you guys know that they put all these machines in gyms because we don't have friends anymore. And so, but it used to be that you would go to the gym and you would work out with a workout buddy, and you would actually depend upon them. Because you'd be down on the bench and you'd be bench pressing and you're heaving. Now, in order to get the bar up at the end, you need to make sure that you're not going to fail if you're alone. You got to work with a safe weight. You got to make sure you don't push yourself too hard. It's built into the exercise that you have to be careful while working out. So you bring a workout buddy in and it changes the whole dynamic. Now you can push to the very, very end, and that workout buddy the whole time can be telling you, let's go, you can do one more, you can do one more. And now you can go to complete failure, because when you get it halfway up and you give out and it starts coming back down on you to crush your ribs, all of a sudden your buddy steps in and says, hold it, I'm here for you. And they lift that bar back up for you. And they put it back up, and all of a sudden you're like, yes, now I pushed myself further than I ever had before, and I had someone who was looking out for me, who could encourage me along the way and catch me when I failed. See, you can't be, if you're selfishly motivated, you can't, if you're only interested in your workout and how good it's going to go for you, you can't be a good buddy. You've got to get rid of this selfish ambition sort of a thing. There's a few people that were stuck on a deserted island. It was a pastor and a priest and a lawyer. They were stuck on a deserted island. And one day, they had been there for a long time. It had been years that they had been trapped on this island. And all of a sudden, the pastor one day was foraging for food, and he comes across a genie's lamp. Well, rather than just rub the lamp, he decides to take it back to his buddies, and they all rub it together. And out pops a genie, and the genie says, hey, 3 wishes, 3 people. I'll split them up. You each get 1 wish. It's a good thing the pastor found it. And so the pastor says, I really miss my family. I miss my church. I miss the work that I was doing and the lives that were being changed. And I miss all of that stuff, those relationships. I just miss them. I wish I could go home. Poof, he disappears and he heads home. The priest says, I feel the exact same way. I miss all the work that I was doing and all the people I was connected to and the brothers and all of that stuff. I wish I can go back to the Vatican. Poof, he goes off to the Vatican. The lawyer says, well, my friends didn't really like me or trust me. My family, after that lawsuit, they disowned me. So, I kind of like the island. It's become home for me. In fact, the only thing that's wrong with it is that I'm going to be lonely now. I wish my friends were here. This is what selfish ambition does. When you're not actually interested in what happens to other people, when you're not interested in what goes on for them, you're only absorbed with what's happening in your tiny little world. You're only thinking about what's going on for you. And that selfish ambition will be a sure end to the fellowship, which is so key, so important. It's a rivalry kind of a word. It's even a competitive kind of a word in the negative sense of that. It's the making yourself look bigger so others can be smaller kind of a thing. He also tells us about vain conceit. Think of this idea, vain conceit, as sort of an empty pride. An empty pride. There's a little twist that Paul, I think, is playing with here. Some of you may be familiar with a doctrine. It's an old term now, and it's not used very often, but it's a term called kenosis. It's the emptying of Christ. It's taken from this very passage where it says that Christ, we'll look at it in a minute, where Christ sort of emptied himself. He sort of emptied himself of all, in some way, this mystery of the kenosis. Well, this is a similar word that Paul is using here for vain conceit, as if he's almost playing on a concept. Almost as if he's saying, Jesus, who was filled with all things worthy of pride, emptied himself of those things. We, however, fill ourselves up with pride, but on closer inspection, that pride is empty. It's as if you stuffed a big old shell in your soul. And when you got past that shell, you found out that there was nothing in it. You had a cup, but it was empty. You've got vain conceit, an empty pride. Can you just think through a minute, all of the things that we take pride in that are meaningless. The things that we get all excited about, the things we pursue. How you'll be talking to someone and they'll explain to you just how much money they've made over the last 10 years. You know how much money I made over the last 10 years? Whee! Vain conceit, empty pride. We take pride in the things that we're building and how we surround ourselves and the types of vehicles we drive. We surround ourselves with a type of a lifestyle that we take pride in, and these things are meaningless. They are empty. These will not in any way be tied to your lasting joy or happiness. We've seen it time and time again. The researchers tell us to be connected with people in life-giving, sharing kinds of relationships is essential. We'll take pride in our health. What does this even mean? How do you take pride in how well things are going really well for me? It's like, really, these are empty pride things. See, now, when the scriptures are redirecting us, it's pulling us into the kinds of areas that actually matter for good, forever, that last. It begins to break down all of these things we get so excited about that in the end are meaningless. These are the vain conceits that Paul is talking about. Empty pride, meaningless pride might be another way of looking at it. Now, the exercises to shore up this kind of weakness, this self-centered weakness, Paul tells us, is humility. That's what he told us there in 2:3, chapter 2, verse 3, in the second half. He says, "Rather in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others." Humility is one of these confusing ideas. As soon as you pursue humility, you seem to lose it. Do you ever notice this? You can't really talk about how humble you are. It's a very confusing kind of a concept for me. It's like apartments. Why do they call them apartments when they're all connected together? This doesn't make any sense to me. The Department of Interior, it's interested in all things outside. Why would you? I heard someone say recently, they said that you could tell a man that there is 5 billion stars in the universe and he will believe you. If you tell him that the paint on the bench is wet, he has to touch it to see if you're right. It's like, these things are just confusing. Humility is one of these kind of confusing sorts of things, these mysteries. To grasp after it, it suddenly flees. And yet Paul gives us a very straightforward way of understanding humility. Very practical, very pragmatic. Rather than pursuing trying to be humble, he tells us, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests. Now, in Greek thought, this would have been the Greeks had a very well-developed sense of the free man. And any sort of subjugation, they didn't like. They didn't like the idea that you would be in some way subject to another, that others would be in some way considered better. There was a fierce equality. And there are a lot of great things came out of that school of thought, democracies being one of them. American principles are largely based on this. But you know what happens when these things go awry? You start to see that we don't look out for the interests of others. We start only looking out for the interests of the one that we think is most important to us. And we fail in this exercise of humility. This idea of looking out for the others, he says to look out for, it shows up like 6 or so times in the rest of the scriptures, this word, and it always carries with it this idea of examination. He's not saying be aware of the needs of others. He's saying study them, look for them, examine them, find them. He's not saying if you happen to hear about the need of someone in your little community. He's saying be so invested that you care about them such that you'll help uncover, you'll help be a part of them. You will look for them. You won't allow people to go through their lives with no one looking out for them. You will look for them in a more intensive and complete way. You want to be a part of their lives in such a way that you will know them and you will see them and you will be able to help and support them. This isn't a passive kind of a command or a request. To look out for them is more intense than that. He's asking us to have a Christian love that is wide enough to include the people around us. Wide enough to include the people around us. And though we say we're too busy or we don't have enough resources or we don't have enough time, we've just made decisions not to look out for the interests of others. That's what we've done. Because we're so busy pursuing our own little kingdoms, our own little fiefdoms. Now, we know that humility, of course, is a tough challenge. We know that laying this charge out to Greek thinkers, I should say, in the Roman colony at Philippi would have been immediately looked down upon as a non-virtue that you're asking me to pursue. It wouldn't have been considered a virtuous thing. I think for many Americans, we have a similar response to it. We're not loving the idea. We're not digging this idea. So I think for many of us, when we hear about this sort of a thing, we need some encouragement. I think Paul knew that his audience needed some encouragement. In fact, at this point, I think Paul takes out the big guns. I don't think Paul had big guns because he was like an academic tent maker on the side. Jesus, I think, had big guns. He was a carpenter. He was this beefy kind of a guy, and we should all be like Jesus in this way. But he takes out the big, because what do you do when you're faced with a challenge? When you're faced with an obstacle, the bigger the obstacle, the more aggressive the solution you need to come up with. Isn't that the case? If it's a huge problem, if it's a huge challenge, if it's a huge obstacle, you need to pull out all the stops. You need to go all the way. And in this moment, Paul does that. Paul comes to the best and biggest and most amazing example he can possibly come up with to teach us about humility. Look here at verse 5. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. He says in the very nature, guys, this is the Christian doctrine of the Trinity. The Father, Son, and Spirit are equally divine for the Christian. We don't understand how it all works. We don't understand how this Trinity happens. There's one God, but somehow he exists forever in this triunity, in the Godhead of Father, Son, and Spirit. So Jesus isn't simply this creature made by God, this part of the creation. He is, in fact, God himself. Now the cross makes a whole lot more sense, and it makes it incredibly more profound and more difficult to understand. In this way now, we find out that God himself, this was a guy worthy. He had all that he would need. He was completely and perfectly self-sufficient. He had deity. He's God himself, and he was willing to give those things up for us. Not using it to his own advantage, as Paul says, but instead using it for our advantage. What kind of an example or a model is this now? He's saying, don't you understand? If Jesus could do this, and he pushes it even further. He says, it's not even that he would simply come here and teach us, but that he would lay down his life, and not simply lay down his life, but the cross. See, now the Jews had this view of the cross because of a verse in the Pentateuch about all who hang on a tree are cursed. That if you were to die on a cross, this is like the lowest of lows. This is as bad as it gets. Romans, and Philippi was a Roman colony, so the citizens of Philippi were different from other occupied cities. They were actually Roman citizens, as if they were living in Rome. They were Roman citizens with all the rights, all the privileges. It would be like living in Hawaii, even though you're not on the mainland. It's like, it's that kind of status. You're still an American citizen, and we have certain things that we cling to, that we know. We have due process, and there are things that we are owed as citizens. You can't just lock us up without a trial, and we're entitled to our phone call, and we have all of these privileges that we don't even care if others get often. You know what? Do whatever you want overseas, but you can't do that to Americans. Romans, they had these things as well. The Roman citizens, with Roman citizenship came certain privileges. One of them, you could never be crucified. They didn't crucify Romans. It was below their citizenship status. And here Paul is saying, really? Below it? Because here's God doing it for you. You want to know how far humility goes? You want to know how deep he's willing to descend? What you consider below you, Jesus doesn't consider below him. He started so much higher and he went so much lower than we would ever even consider reasonable. And isn't that, of course, the point? To be able to take that humility, to go deeper and further into what it means to look out for the interests of others. And then, of course, it tells us that God exalted him. So, does that mean that there would be some exaltation promised to those of us? Now, we told you about our P90S challenge. The P90S challenge for this series was to give 90 minutes a week, Monday through Saturday, 15 minutes a day, and to be using that time to read the book of Philippians once through, to work on your memory verses, which you've got another one sitting on your seat for you, and, of course, to spend the remainder of the time in prayer. That's the first part of the P90S challenge. It is not the only part of the P90S challenge. I'm going to ask you for another 90 minutes. Another 90 minutes. For those of you who are already in growth groups, you're going to get a walk on this one. But those of you who aren't, I'm asking you to consider signing up, joining a growth group, to be part of another 90 minutes a week, where those 90 minutes are geared toward knitting you together with others who are like-minded. Others who are interested in this same sort of pursuit, who have a mutual affection for each other, who are being knit together in the Spirit in a way that they will not pursue their selfish ambition and vain conceits, but instead will look out for each other's interests. If you have never been part of a group, I would love for you to take a shot at it. Over the next few weeks, we will form some additional groups for you. If we don't have room in the existing groups, we'll make sure for some of you can be folded into some of the existing groups, depending on schedule. We have, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of almost 80 or 90 people currently in growth groups. That's not all of us. And we would love to give you all an opportunity to experience this. Now, you might be saying, oh my goodness, I'm struggling with my first 90 minutes, and now you're asking me for another. I did not tell you that this was for everyone. I never promised you that our P90 challenge would be something easy for you to do. I just said, if you do these things, it will strengthen your spiritual core. And you will be making investments now for all of eternity. You will be finding a new source of energy, of strength, of wisdom, of guidance, of encouragement. You say, no, I can't do it, too much. I totally understand. Just like P90X, it's not for everyone. It is definitely another step up for those that want to get more serious about the work that God is doing in their souls. I would say you'd be hard-pressed to find a better way to invest 90 minutes. But I totally get it if you ain't up for it. If you're interested, take your connection card out in a few moments when we do that. Mark it out. Let us know. I'm not in a group. I want to be in a group. And we will do everything that we can to make certain that that is an opportunity for you. Would you guys pray with me? Lord, we're asking that you would make these truths ever more real to us. We do need other people. We do need to invest our lives in them. For many of us, Lord, we wonder why it is we're stuck, why we can't press past where we're at. We wonder why we feel stagnant in our growth. Lord, you have given us this fellowship, this community of like-minded people, to have a shared life, a shared experience where we might encourage and challenge and support each other as we are strengthening our spiritual cores. I pray that even now you would be stirring up people's hearts, that they would look at this as a very real and very time-important way, that they might come to know and love you more. The greatest commandments, Lord, will be more fulfilled and strengthened in our own experience as we do this. We ask that you would enable us to see that value, to experience it, Lord, so that we might act on it. We ask all these things in Christ's name. Amen.